good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's webcast, Building Supply Chains for Global Resilience, presented by the Journal of Commerce by S&P Global. We'd like to thank AD Ports Group today for partnering with us on our two-part series. If you haven't watched it yet, I encourage you to visit the webcast section of our website to view part one of the series, which aired last week, Navigating Geopolitical Shifts, Strategies for Ports in an Uncertain World. I'm Alessandra Barrett, Associate Director of Special Projects at the Journal of Commerce, and I'll be your moderator today. Our presenters joining us are Edward Albridge, Chief Operating Officer of Nuatum Logistics at AD Ports Group, Yusuf Al-Riyami, Chief Technology Officer of the Digital Cluster at AD Ports Group, Siddharth Bafna, Chief Products Officer of the KZAD Group, Jacob Larson, Chief Strategy and Product Officer of the Ports Cluster. Now, before we begin, I have some quick housekeeping notes. Everything you see on the platform will help you navigate this webcast, and you can really customize the screens to what you want to be seeing. You will also see very clearly space to submit questions for our audience, for our speakers, which we'll leave time for at the end of the presentation. You can also download speaker bios and download the slides that we have. Please submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. We'll take them at the end, but it's always great to have them queued up early in. We value your feedback and do use it to better tailor our program, so please also take a moment at the very end to complete the evaluation form that's going to pop up. You can also access it through the resource widget on the webcast console. So I'm going to start with Jacob, who is, again, Chief Strategy and Product Officer, the Ports Cluster for AD Ports Group. I'm sorry, I should have welcomed you all. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Alessandra.
Now, thanks. Jacob, when we consider the landscape and the importance of planning for disruption, which strategies do you recommend for ports and logistics companies focused on maintaining their position as leading trading hubs?
Well, I think from our perspective, we've had tremendous success in forging global partnerships with industry giants such as our partners on the shipping lines, MSC, COSCO Group, CMA CGM, but also local and regional champions such as the ADNOC Group, Autoterminal Barcelona, and others. These partnerships has really meant that our business during challenging times, and especially experienced during the pandemic, was more solid in terms of our business base. We had built long-term relationships where we could consolidate business. We had ability to cater for some of the, you can say, congestions that were in the regional ports. We had additional capacity that we could handle, and also expansions of our capacity in advance. So planning these sort of resilience measures together with these partners, and that's also how we look at expansions going forward.
What role do you see innovation playing in strengthening the resiliency of supply chains?
It's massively important. It's obviously an ongoing journey, and again, necessity really is the mother of invention. So we come up with new ways of doing things. During COVID, again, we trialed together with our colleagues from the Digital Cluster, where Mr. Al-Riyami is also on the call today, remote operation of one of our container terminals successfully, to the point where now you could argue that is a viable business model across the globe. So it's no longer necessary to physically have as much staff in every single port. You could also look at best practices, and the technology is just moving so fast, right? That keeping your finger on the pulse there is really absolutely key to building additional resilience in your supply chain.
What are your thoughts on digital transformation and AI specifically in combating supply chain volatility?
Well, again, to my previous point, technology plays a key role, both on the efficiency side. We have a high level of automation in our existing flagship port in Khalifa Port, where we deploy AI for a number of the automation elements already. We have partnerships with various technology partners looking at further investing in these cutting-edge technologies. So it's absolutely crucial for us that we continue this. We also established the first digital innovation lab in the Middle East as a group, which I'm sure my colleague Yusuf will cover more on. So speeding this up is really going to be absolute key to weathering future storms, but also, again, creating more visibility in the supply chain to the benefit both of our customers, but also the customer's customer.
Siddharth, I want to turn it to you for a minute. Siddharth Bhafna, again, is the Chief Products Officer for KZ Group. Let's talk about climate change and environmental concerns as another force of volatility. What are your thoughts on how global entities can create circular supply chains, moving away from linear ones that generate waste and impact sustainability?
Yeah, thanks, Alessandra, for that question. I think climate change is something that we take very seriously at Abu Dhabi Ports Group. Our customers take that very seriously, and with UAE hosting COP28 in a couple of weeks' time, literally now, it is something that we think about in a very proactive manner. Let me try and answer that with probably a real life situation, right? Something that we've been doing for a while. One of the big consumers of power and electricity is the metals industry in general, right? So we have one of the largest aluminum smelters in the world, a grassroots level smelter within our zone in our KEZAD zone next to the Khalifa port. And the way we look at circular economy is not just using someone's end product as a waste to convert into something else. I think that's been a more simplistic view on circular economy in the past. But we are now extending that in terms of replicating whole value chains within a certain place. So not only is it about ensuring that there is a consumption or a reconsumption of waste, but having a co-location of the entire value chain whereby not only is the byproduct or waste managed, but also you cut down on the inefficiencies and the costs arising from those inefficiencies in every way, right? So coming back to my example of EGA, one of the largest metal smelters, aluminum metal smelters in the world, located within KEZAD, we have invested in a hot metal road adjacent to the EGA facility, which is a dedicated piece of infrastructure enabling transport of hot liquid metal coming in right out of the furnace into the crucible, into the factories of downstream industries that convert it into products such as high precision aluminum parts that go into cars, for example, or very specialized pipelines carrying high pressure gas and so on, right? So that's kind of one way of looking at this, and this has tangible benefits not just to the environment but to the customers as well. All of us know that energy is the biggest cost of production. It basically impacts the cost of production of metal in the biggest way, right? 40% of the cost into creating an aluminum product is actually power. And by doing this, we are eliminating 40% cost for the downstream industry, right? So not only are you creating a ready market, a very captive, sticky market for a big producer like EGA, you're also providing the downstream players access to a very competitive kind of a scenario, right? And then we don't stop there. Right from there, there is a lot of carbon that is emitted in the manufacturing process itself, right? So how do we work with that carbon capture? How do you make sure that that carbon capture is then used into other byproduct industries such as carbon black and so on, right? Rather than it being then taken away or processed somewhere else, or worse, dumped into a landfill or something like that. So, that's the other aspect that we look at it. The third thing that we're doing now is, as we move forward, you realize that not every downstream industry requires only pure virgin aluminum. If we want to promote the increase of recycled material as well, right? So we are now working on getting a secondary smelter that is working with recycled aluminum to increase the input of aluminum. So, I could go on and on, but the point is that you look at the entire value chain, you look at the capture of it, You look at how that value chain can be served both inward and outward through the Khalifa port that Jakob was mentioning about a while back, and also creating a marketplace that leads to economic sustenance, right? So once those products are there, how do you not just distribute them globally, but create a real marketplace so a big chunk of the economic value is captured within here? So that's our view on circular economy in a way.
Now, you've touched on some of this, but just to sort of zoom out a bit, AD Ports Group specifically, how do you plan to safeguard against potential disruptions caused by global health crises, future pandemics? I mean, we know that we're looking at a different future now than we may have thought, 20, 30 years ago. So let me come back a minute. AD Ports Group, what are you doing to ensure those supply chains remain resilient and operational in face of all of these potential global health crisis volatility, cause of volatility?
Sure. So I would say that we are kind of having three broad strategies towards enabling more resilient supply chain. The first strategy is around enabling distributed manufacturing. All of us keep talking about nearshoring and distributed manufacturing, but it's got to make sense from a market access perspective. It's not just about having a lower cost of production. It's not just being in an environment which supports distribution alone. You've got to bring those factors in together. And what we are doing is very consciously working with companies that are looking at having that distributed manufacturing. I mean, some people call it a China plus one model, but it's a lot more complex than that. It's not just a China plus one, right? The whole world is in a situation today where people want to de-risk without losing the competitiveness. And that's where we are trying to come in. We are saying, okay, we do recognize that there are certain efficiencies of operating a certain geography. Again, let's take the example of China. There is a certain level of efficiency you have by manufacturing in China, and it's not just about lower cost of production. I think that was a situation probably a couple of decades back, but today it's just one of the most productive places in the world to manufacture, right? But how do we kind of take that piece of manufacturing over here? And what we are doing is we are creating more and more enablers for manufacturers to come in here and leverage some of the other competencies that we have that enable them to get into that nearshoring. So our access to the Indian subcontinent, for example, right? Our access to the wider North Africa region through the logistics capabilities that UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular have, that become a big driver to compensate some of the efficiency trade-offs, if I may call it that, that they would lose by shifting part of the scale from a larger manufacturing base to here, right? So that's one big thing that we are focusing on, right? How do you enable nearshoring? How do you enable distributed manufacturing? The second thing that we are doing is, and this sounds simple, right? But what we are doing is we are actually getting the entire Abu Dhabi value proposition, the entire Abu Dhabi stakeholder. We call it Abu Dhabi Inc. internally, right? So you get the big pockets of guys like Mubadala and Adia and all these guys, right? I mean, this has always been one of the large capital pools that the world has. So you take that capital pool. You take the ease of doing business that UAE is so well known for, right? I mean, at times we've had people from the so-called Western economies, and I don't say this in a demeaning way, but we've skipped a couple of technology generations, and what you have over here on the technology side is absolute cutting edge, right? And we are able to implement that really fast. UAE is known for that. Yusuf will speak a lot more about that subsequently, but you get that entire technology edge along with the capital edge. And then the last thing is you have access to talent from literally all over the world. Right? You have access to the best of talent from all the places. You can get the skilled labor, you can get the blue-collar labor. All your factors of production are kind of available to you over here. And when you club all of that together, the value proposition that Abu Dhabi provides is something which is quite phenomenal. Club that with the high standards of living, the convenience of living out here. It's a place where people want to come and work, not just because it's tax free, but because it's just a very convenient place to plug and play as an individual as it is for an organization. So, the entire Abu Dhabi value proposition and leveraging Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi stakeholders together is the other big part of what we're doing. And the third one is engaging trade amongst people who are already in there. And I can't emphasize this enough, right? The kind of buying and selling that happens within the stakeholders, within Abu Dhabi itself or within UAE itself is unbelievable. We've always, I think coming in from a trading background, UAE has always been a part of multiple trade routes that's been enhanced further by the deep logistics capabilities with world-class ports and airports that we have in the country. And that trade is very sticky. It doesn't kind of move that easily. And the more manufacturing that comes in over here, the trade outlets, the market access that we spoke about earlier, coming from there, right? So we see that as a massive advantage for anyone who wants to come here. So I would say that's how we are working on creating more resilient supply chains. We are working on creating almost bulletproof ways of dealing with these things. And again, to give an example, I know I'm taking more time than I should, but to give you a quick example. UAE imports almost 90% of its food, and what we've done over the last couple of years, post COVID, is we've invested dramatically as Abu Dhabi ports into creating mega infrastructure for stockpiling of food that is required over here. But you can't just stockpile food and let it decay, right? So what we've done is, along with that, we've leveraged the trading that we spoke about so that the stockpile keeps replenishing itself, and yet there is security of food for the people over here. But that's not a long-term solution. So, alongside we are, for example, investing in creating agtech parks and so on, right? So those are the kind of things we are doing to ensure that the resilience, especially for critical items, medicines, food, where historically we've been more dependent on the outside world, that comes down. And we believe in trade, we believe in an open market, and hence we don't believe in kind of cutting down that dependence to a zero. But we want to make sure that things are at more arm's length availability than a plain ride availability.
What about the rising trend of localizing supply chains as a means for countries to enhance their own resilience, minimize dependencies? What are your thoughts on how you accommodate that trend?
SMEs thrive where they have, so again, anecdotally, almost 60% of the SMEs we have within KIZAD, they serve clients within KIZAD itself, right? So typically when you have a large company or a large cluster of companies focusing on the same industry, you'll see mushrooming of a lot of SMEs that kind of cater to that business, right? And that's not just in the product category, it's also in the service category. Again, a small example, right? When you have 100 factories, mega factories that come up, that means that you need to have 100 FM companies, a facilities management company, going in, cleaning the floors and polishing the tables, right? So you have a lot of SMEs that come in once the economic activity over there increases, right? And the kind of offerings that you require for the SME sector are fairly different than the kind of considerations that are taken by the larger sector, right? And we try to balance both of them. What we do is we enable SMEs by giving them a lot of modularity in terms of our product offering. For instance, if there is an SME that wants to get into, serving a large customer through having small batch processing of polymers, for example, right? What we do is we create pre-built small facilities wherein they can come in and start their activity without having too much of capital investment. We also enable them to have direct contact with the large suppliers and buyers. We have a platform called Josur that we've developed now, where peer-to-peer level play is enabled and encouraged, wherein customers, we have more than 1,500 active companies operating. It's impossible for everyone to know their neighbors, right? But when you have them all on a platform, digitally enabled by our friends at the digital cluster at Makta, it becomes much easier for them to access these opportunities, and the overall cost of serving that demand is much lower, right? Because they are literally next door. So that makes the entire operational exceptionally effective and competitive.
Thank you. Now, I do want to remind our audience, about 20 minutes in, do take this opportunity to ask any questions that may have come to mind while our first two presenters were speaking. For those that might not be familiar, AD Ports Group today serves as one of the world's premier facilitators of logistics industry and trade, as well as a bridge linking Abu Dhabi to the world. And listed on the Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange as AD Ports, the group operates several clusters covering ports, economic cities, and free zones, maritime and shipping, logistics, and digital. We have two representatives from two of the clusters here today. The portfolio also comprises more than 30 ports and terminals and more than 550 square kilometers of economic zones within the KZAD Group, which is the largest integrated trade, logistics, and industrial business grouping in the Middle East. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context there for any who might not be familiar with some of the terms that are being thrown around, or sorry, some of the entities that are being spoken about. Now we're going to turn the conversation to Edward Albridge, who is Chief Operating Officer of Noatum Logistics, which was recently acquired by AD Ports Group. Edward, thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Alessandra, and greetings everyone from Shanghai.
Wonderful. Now, I'd like to get your thoughts on the overall landscape that we're facing in context of supply chain restructuring caused by the pandemic and current geopolitical dynamics. How do you view the current and future direction of global trade? We'll start with what are the major opportunities?
I think, first of all, the first thing to say is that we are in constant evolution. Supply chains are under constant pressure, and the cycle, the peaks and the troughs in supply chain disruption are getting deeper and higher. And when I hear my fellow presenters talk about resilience, I can only echo that. I would also add, though, that we create resilience through adding contingency and flexibility within the supply chain itself. And I think they're two critical things that have to be built in as part of your supply chain planning, because those two items, in addition to getting really upstream of your supply chain, so looking before before orders become freight, if you like, because the earlier you're able to identify challenges, the earlier you're able to adapt and adjust and actually take advantage of that contingency and flexibility that you've built in to your supply chain, which will give you that resilience that is needed and will continue to be needed in the future as well, in my eyes.
What are the key challenges that you see at the moment?
I think, as I said, certainly more severe swings.
Okay.
Changing geopolitical challenges. I think sourcing changes. I think it was mentioned before about sourcing and adjusting your sourcing plans. Nearshoring, regulatory requirements as well are challenges, and generally the complexity of a multi-party fragmented supply chain. The name tells you everything. That's what they are. In many cases, they are fragmented pieces that need to be simplified. And the way that I see simplification of a multi-party fragmented supply chain comes from the digitalization, digital view. Physical, I call them boots on the ground, experts in the field, experts in logistics, experts in customs, and then finally the integration of those in many cases fragmented pieces of the supply chain, the more you can integrate those and have them seamlessly connect, the more resilient you'll become. But that's what I see, Alessandro, as the main challenges.
So I've got a two-part question, and that is looking at the opportunities. What are your thoughts on how companies, what's your top advice for how companies could position themselves or should to take advantage of the opportunities? And then specifically, what's Snow Autumn been doing to take advantage of new opportunities there?
Yeah, I think in not wanting to repeat myself, but that resilience, the resilience piece, making that part of the plan, very early on set out that part of the supply chain strategy will include contingency. In order for it to be effective, it needs to be built in as part of the plan. Because if it's not, by the time you need the resilience and contingency, it's already too late. So it has to be embedded as part of the supply chain planning, if you like. And to answer your second point, what's Snow Autumn been doing? We've been ensuring that we are able to provide that integrated physical and digital solution to our clients. So integrating the various divisions so that we're able to provide that seamless offer to our client and provide that resilience to them. And what that essentially means is that we're able to move product in the best, most effective way and most cost-effective way, that's how we've been providing that advantage to our clients.
I do feel that you can't emphasize that too much at this point. I'd like to talk about inflationary pressures. So we have elevated borrowing rates, high energy and labor costs, the shift away from just in time to just in case, and of course the move to decarbonization. How can and should global logistics players manage costs and profitability when they're facing this?
I think being operationally efficient, that's a key element, and digitalization as well. So they're the two elements that I would suggest would be key for managing profitability. And I think, as I said before as well, being able to have that connection through the various divisions as we do, through a common system as well.
Any thoughts on how one can remain competitive globally around the topic of decarbonization when you are dealing with a topic that is perceived, prioritized, and enforced differently around the world? How do you remain competitive among your global competitors with that different perspective?
Sorry, Alessandro, I missed that. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
It's on the topic of decarbonization. So how can companies, businesses remain competitive globally when decarbonization is perceived and prioritized and enforced differently around the world?
Include it it has to be part of the plan, and it has to be an understanding that forms part of the landed cost of a product, that the decarbonization will be an element that will be a legal requirement for all parties to contribute towards. And I think that we talk about resilience and being able to be cost effective. Well, we do that through avoiding unnecessary air freight, for example. Well, how do we do that? How do we avoid unnecessary air freight? Air freight may be a requirement as part of the supply chain, but how do you avoid unnecessary air freight? Well, you do that through getting upstream of your supply chain and having visibility over your product lines and what the requirements are to move freight. You move it in the most effective way. So yeah, that's, I go back to the being upstream of your product and being able to make adjustments very, very quickly and avoid unnecessary cost.
Great. Now I'd like to shift the conversation to our final presenter, Yusuf Al-Riyami, Chief Technology Officer of the Digital Cluster for AD Ports Group. Thanks for joining us today. Make sure we can hear. Yusuf, just want to make sure you're not frozen there.
Yes, my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. On the topic of automation and digital transformation, can we start with some information on how that fits into the overall AD Ports Group strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. AD Ports Group put a lot of focus on digital and automation. And this is represented by the digital cluster, one of the 5 clusters within the group. And this shows the importance of the digital that AD Ports Group look for. And from the start, AD Ports Group has been investing in automation and digital transformation to enhance the operation and connectivity. And this is starting from the establishment of the first semi-automated terminal in the region, which is Khalifa Port. And this automation enabled us to continue our operation during the pandemic, as my colleagues also mentioned earlier, and enabled us also to do most of our operations from remote location. And this helped our staff to reduce their commute during the pandemic to the port. We also implementing various technologies like IoT, artificial intelligence, blockchain to optimize our processes within our network. Our terminals also now starting to operate with autonomous trucks for some of the terminals within our network. And we are also looking to expand this to other terminals within our portfolio. In addition to that, we implemented a digital platform to serve our all stakeholders within the port community, which we call it ATLP, the Advanced Trade and Logistics Platform, connecting more than 30 stakeholders within our community and offering more than 800 services for all our customers, whether they are shipping agents, clearing agents, freight forwarders, traders, and investors in case of our KZAD customers as well. We also now started our journey in AI. We developed many use cases in various domains. And all of this, how this all impacted our business with more than 120 million transactions now. This allowed to increase our productivity by 50% overall, reduce the physical visits by more than 80%, and reduce the physical documents more than 90% overall. And this enabled our customers to do their business from anywhere. Some of our customers also reduce their presence near the ports, since they can do their business from anywhere around the world, and helped us to ensure the continuity of their business with our systems that are available 24/7.
How are you using data, the data that's coming from these initiatives?
Yes, this is a good question. Now, as you know now, what they are saying now, data is now the new oil, and this is the fuel for the new era of artificial intelligence.
Right.
And we use our data as it allows our organization to measure the effectiveness of our given strategies at AD Ports Group, being one of the fast-growing ports. we have data-driven strategy that enable AD Ports Group to determine how well we are performing, and we are able to identify the areas of improvement that we have. We emphasize on our data-driven policy, and we established a central command center. We call it the DOME, where our leadership review the performance of different clusters within our portfolio, and also review the initiatives purely on data-driven analysis. We have different use cases now that we are implemented to support our group, including demand forecasting by utilizing historical and real-time data, identifying potential risk within our supply chain, such as geopolitical issues, weather conditions that affects the vessel movement, any market vulnerabilities, and this information will allow the group to proactively develop risk mitigation strategies. Also, we have other data use cases that identify the most efficient transportation routes and modes available, ensuring timely deliveries, especially for our logistics cluster. All of this also, we are now moving from traditional data-driven analysis technique to more AI driving data analysis technique, which help us filter required data from millions of transactions, as mentioned, more than 100 million transactions created so far, in addition to our video analytics from all the footage in our ports cluster to help us improve our efficiency and performance in the ports operation.
Of course, with increased access to these tools, we do have increased vulnerability. So when it comes to risk mitigation for related to cyber attacks, technology failures, how are you addressing that aspect of this big picture?
In terms of security in general, we apply the best-in-class capabilities from this different aspects. Of course, we implement the best guidelines in terms of data protection, including the TDRA in UAE and the GDPR for our international business as well. We regularly ensure that all our infrastructure are protected. We invested in robust monitoring and alerting system with our central security operations system, center that operate 24/7. We do regular drills, security assessment, penetration testing to ensure proactively that our infrastructure, digital platforms are protected against any potential attacks. And finally, not to forget our, we can say the weakest link, which are the employees themselves. We ensure that all our employees are trained and aware of all the cybersecurity trends, and ensure that they are regularly having awareness sessions, and we do some simulation to ensure that these awareness sessions are effective.
Now, digital supply chain twins continue to be among key supply chain trends. What do you feel are the main advantages when using this solution?
Yes, the world has become more unpredictable than ever. And whenever a change takes place, be it a situation like pandemic or a geopolitical change, supply chain is among the first thing to be disrupted. Since then, companies and leading providers, and as AD Ports Group, we are investing to build resilience in our supply chain. And of course, digital twin plays a major role here. And we invest in this technology in different scenarios. including the real-time supply chain visibility. We ensure that this technology supports us to have a real visibility on our supply chain throughout the process of the goods movement. Also it help us in our simulation for our pilots in our AD Maritime Academy, in the yard planning in the ports using digital twin, for example, in dangerous goods handling. And finally, apart from all of the port operation terminals and the economic zones, we are also now expanding our maritime operations, and with more than 200 vessels owned and operated by our maritime cluster, we are also expanding our IoT in this domain as well.
Now, before we turn this, I'm just watching the clock here, before we turn this to the audience, I would like to address blockchain to both yourself and Edward. Blockchain's position in the demand for increased supply chain visibility is something that's been spoken about for the last couple decades, really, in a way. What are your thoughts on leveraging blockchain? Sorry, I'll let you answer first, and then I'll turn it to Edward.
Yeah, sure. Blockchain is an emerging technology and has a potential to revolutionize supply chain management. In AD Ports Group and in the digital cluster, we implemented our own supply chain technology, which we called it Selsal. Selsal means chain in Arabic. And we have done many pilots for these technologies with ports in Spain and India to prove how this technology can work in the near future. In addition, we also implemented the solution with our product called Immunity that we use to track the supply chain of the vaccines during the pandemic in partnership with the Hub Consortium that was established here in Abu Dhabi. And using this solution, more than 200 million vaccines were tracked to be delivered to more than 50 countries during the pandemic. And we see this is just the beginning, and there are many use cases that can be leveraged in the future to enhance the use of the blockchain and Selsal, our product, in the future.
Edward, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that it will clearly be a huge enabler, but there's still, I think, a lot of work still to be done there. Alessandro, as you pointed out, it's been a topic of discussion for many years already, and I think part of that challenge is again bringing the complexity of the supply chain and the data elements that are varied and vast, and bringing those together, and that clearly takes time. But there will be a huge advantage of using that information.
Great. Well, let's just see. I see a few questions that have come in from the audience. Some are sort of overlapping in either topics that we've discussed as the presentation went on, and some of them perhaps might overlap each other. So I might just summarize and combine a few of them. Let's go. But please continue to submit. We have a few more minutes. So if you have anything that's come to mind, take a chance to submit it. If we don't get to it before the end of our presentation, our speakers will reply by email. This one's for Jakob. Are there any key metrics you utilize when assessing the success of a supply chain?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a number of metrics. When we talk about supply chain for the ports specifically, we form one link of the chain, or you can argue maybe a couple of links, but together with my colleagues who are on the call as well, form a larger part of that chain. So we, of course, on the metrics in the port, we look at things from a number of different customer perspectives. One side, of course, is the main operational KPIs, such as dwell time, turnaround time for trucks and containers, to port stays for the shipping lines. On the other hand, we also look at transaction times for the end users, the cargo owners, to see how quickly can we actually get through the entire process of entering the port, including the appointments that they make on our platform that is managed by our digital cluster, all the way through analyzing every single piece of information along the way. We have stakeholders involved, such as customs, food security authorities, and other elements. So there are a number of different metrics throughout the entire chain. So we basically take it and analyze activity by activity and determine what is the key metric that we need to look at. We're fortunate that automation was built into our facility in Khalifa Port. And with that comes a lot of data points that we're able to capture. And then with the collaboration of our colleagues in the digital cluster, we're able to analyze these and really look at pinpointing key elements of improvements, whether it's traffic management, whether it's approvals of appointments and gate passes, whether it's looking at implementing dynamic pricing for appointments, where in the areas where the port is less busy, we encourage truckers and customers to come pick up their cargo because it'll be faster. So I would say there's a plethora of metrics that we're able to use, but the key ones for the port side are primarily on the operational side, I would say.
Now I see another one that looks like it would be one for you with COP28 around the corner. What activities and initiatives are you driving within the sustainability domain?
Yeah, thank you. There's a high level of activity, I would say. We're actively collaborating with both existing and future customers on the availability of green energy. You can say in particular, we're collaborating with some of the government entities here on a very large photovoltaic power generation facility that, of course, downstream will also allow us to participate very actively in the green hydrogen space. That is being required by a large number of customers already now. And again, it stretches across all of our clusters in that sense, because the tenants in our industrial zones are looking to convert into green aluminium, green steel production, et cetera, et cetera. And also on the logistics side, we see more and more focus on being able to decarbonize the whole supply chain from end to end. So the activities we undertake, of course, on the very operational side, electrifying our equipment, looking at new technology, shortening driving distances. It might sound like a trivial thing, but all of our equipment in the port is GPS monitored and dynamically assigned to the next container that's picked up based on driving distance between container, vessel, and crane. And over time, when you handle 4 or 5 million containers a year, that actually adds up quite a bit. So there's a large number of activities that we're undertaking, and it's at the very forefront, not only driven by COP28, but of course, a lot of the eyes are focused towards the UAE at the moment, and we're very proud to be a part of that exercise.
This may be a little bit of an overlap, but I'm going to just put it to the group again. With the recent current events around the world, how much do you strategize around not having these events impact your profits? In case there are any additional thoughts that anyone in the group would like to add to that topic. If not, we could just continue.
I think I'm just going to say that, for us to strategize, what we look at is the broad themes. I mean, we've spoken about some of the themes in terms of the world becoming a little more unpredictable, supply chains becoming a little more vulnerable, and hence needing that resilience, and innovation and technology being at the forefront, right? So we look at those broad themes that are there and then build our strategy around that. There would always be some things that require a tactical response. I mean, during COVID, when things are shut down, a part of our business, we also operate cruise terminals. They had to stop working. But there was another part of the business, the part of the business that we are in, the industrial zones. We were working overtime on creating new capacity for storage spaces and so on, right? So I think there's a trade-off in terms of the tactical responses, but the broad strategy is based on how we see the world evolving over the next couple of decades.
Maybe if I can add to that,
Yes.
sorry. I think a lot of it has to do with the organization's ability to pivot and find alternative uses to Siddharth's example of our cruise facilities being unutilized during the COVID pandemic. These were actually converted into vaccination centers and used in the first response of the pandemic. And I think that is just a small example of one thing that companies will need to be able to do is pivot quickly and make these decisions fast to shift focus. Also in Edwards cluster in autumn, their engagement with the HOPE Consortium and the storage of vaccines, not only for this region, but essentially globally, was remarkable in the sense that a cold store facility was very quickly turned into what I believe is one of the most modern vaccine storage facilities in the world, with capabilities of down to minus 85 degrees Celsius of storage. So I think it's really, as a big part of the resilience aspect, is that ability and willingness to make quick decisions and to pivot with your customers to utilize their assets in the most appropriate way for the situation.
Siddharth, we have a question about global investment. So why would a global investor choose to be located within KEZAD? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly honest question to ask, right? So the fact is that manufacturers today, in particular, right, when we are talking about global investors, there are those who are looking at setting up a base more for distribution purposes, and the logistics infrastructure, the connectivity provided by Abu Dhabi and UAE in general is exceptional, right? So that takes care of that by and large, and that's why you've been seeing a lot of companies setting base in the UAE traditionally. But when you look at the manufacturers, that's kind of a new facet of the economy that's been opening up in Abu Dhabi. And there, I think global investors are looking at some of the advantages we spoke about earlier, the entire Abu Dhabi Inc. and the value proposition of Abu Dhabi itself, the policies, the mega trend of nearshoring and things like that, right? But most importantly, I think for us as an organization, we control a very, very big chunk of the industrial real estate in UAE and in Abu Dhabi. And the way we operate is a little bit to what Jakob mentioned a while back, right? In a very agile manner, and more importantly, very, very alongside with what these investors want, right? So a lot of these investment decisions are once in a decade, once in 2 decade kind of a decision for, especially for a manufacturing company. And we walk alongside with them. We work with them on co-investing in parts of infrastructure that are specifically required to make them more competitive, not necessarily in UAE alone, but in other parts of the world as well. There are enough instances I can cite right now where we've worked with investors to secure raw material and the raw material logistics in a different continent altogether, right? So we worked with them, we've created the right kind of logistics infrastructure, maritime infrastructure in that place, and industrial zoning infrastructure in that place to enable that seamless supply chain to work for them. In other instances, what we've also done is we've, again, worked alongside with the investors with some of the roadblocks that you traditionally see in manufacturing. For instance, environmental laws and environmental stipulations can be quite strict, but technology is evolving all the time, right? An industry that was seen, let's take a chemical plant, right? Traditionally, when you think of a chemical plant, you think of toxic gases and gooey liquid coming out of the pipes, right? But technology has evolved over a period of time. You have net zero facilities available right now, but the environmental laws may not be up to it, right? And when an investor comes with that new technology, we work alongside with them, with the relevant agencies, make sure that the environmental agency is satisfied with the responses that are being given by these new investors and so on, right? So we work hand in hand with them, make sure that there is a solution that is driven, and I think that is something that UAE is really good at. Abu Dhabi in particular is changing dramatically on that front, leading the charge literally on making sure that policies, making sure that infrastructure, making sure that capital allocation is all in sync for broadening the base of industry over here. And the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, if you look at the fastest growing part of the economy right now for Abu Dhabi, it is the manufacturing sector, right? It's not the traditional oil and gas sector or the thriving service sector. It's actually the manufacturing sector. And hence, I think that really should give investors the confidence that, this is something that's as important to us as Abu Dhabi and as Abu Dhabi ports as it is for them to grow their business.
Jakob, do you have any thoughts on the elimination of the EU block exemption regulation? Any reactions on that, whether that will be a positive or a negative?
Yeah, look, it's obviously a very recent decision a couple of days ago, I believe. I think it's going to put some immediate challenges in place, right? You've got global shipping lines who've made substantial investments and have substantial order books for very large container vessels, which have substantial economies of scale in terms of cost per unit. The inability or potential inability to not support these things in the long run will mean that each shipping line on its own will have to go out and fill a 24,000 TEU vessel. Alternatively, costs per unit will go up. So I do think that this could generate some substantial challenges in the short term until it is really fully fleshed out what this means, because the vessels are on the water, the capacity is on the water, and there's more coming, right? So it's not for me to necessarily have an opinion on whether it's the right or wrong thing to do, but I think it's very clear that it will generate some substantial challenges for our customers, both on the liner side as providers for the ocean freight element, but also on the cargo owner side, right? Because it's increased cost, and eventually that's going to impact everybody, you and I, when we go to the shops, right? So yeah, I think it's a challenge for sure in uncertain times.
Thank you. Looks like we have time for just one more. Edward, there is a question just for a little bit more information about NOADM and that acquisition and what NOADM brings to the AD Ports Group as far as market access capability and supply chain perspective. Could you speak to that for a moment or two?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, an element within that overall supply chain. So, providing that integrator piece to our clients. Of course, we have access to a much wider network. Wider network also provides us with a wider set of products that we can offer our customers as well, and also our experience. I think I spoke when I first opened the conversation about the importance of having boots on the ground, knowledge, experience, and that experience that we have around the world in the various regions is a benefit that we also bring to our clients, our knowledge and our experience of moving freight around the world.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to our audience. We are out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The webcast will be available on demand within 24 to 48 hours. You'll receive an email reminder about that. I also encourage you to check out our webcast page and visit the first episode, which aired last week. We also have a white paper coming out with AD Ports Group and attendees of this webinar as well as last week will receive a link to download that. For more information related to today's webcast, including where you can leave us your evaluation, please visit the resources link if you haven't already. Thank you again for joining Building Supply Chains for Global Resilience, presented by the Journal of Commerce by S&P Global. We'd like to thank AD Ports Group again for partnering with us on this webcast, and of course, our wonderful presenters. I'm Alessandra Barrett. Have a great day.
Thank you.